Millbridge liked its mornings predictable. The baker opened before sunrise. The miller argued with flour dust in his beard. Rowan Hale unlocked his workshop at the same time he had for the past 30 years, just as the first line of gold split the eastern hills. Routine was safer than hope. Routine didn't disappoint you. That morning broke the routine. Rowan almost didn't see her. She was folded against the stone wall beside his workshop door, tucked into the narrow angle where brick met timber. A shape too large to be a dog, too green to be a shadow. He stood there longer than he meant to, key half turned in the lock, trying to decide if the desert stories he'd heard in his youth had finally caught up with him. But she didn't disappear when he blinked. She was an orc girl, not the towering war brutes of battlefield rumors, not the hornhelm monsters painted in tavern murals. She was young. That was clear in the angles of her shoulders and the way hunger had hollowed her cheeks. Her armor was mismatched and worn, leather cracked at the seams. Her skin, usually said to be vibrant as moss, carried a grayish tint that came from not eating enough for too long. Millbridge pretended not to notice things like this. Rowan could already imagine the reactions. Crane would clutch his holy charm. Ivy would mutter about danger. Someone would whisper that harboring her invited raids. Orcs were enemies. Orcs were monsters. Orcs did not belong leaning against human workshops at sunrise. Her eyes opened. Amber. Sharp. Even through exhaustion. She didn't flinch. Didn't beg. Didn't bare her tusks either. She simply looked at him like he was another obstacle in a world that had offered her too many already. "You're blocking my door," Rowan said gruffly, because when you don't know what to say, practicality fills the gap. Her voice, when it came, was rough from thirst. "Then step over me." That surprised him. Most starving things try to make themselves smaller. He studied her closer. There were old scars along her forearms, battle-earned. Newer bruises shadowed her ribs. Exile markings had been scraped from her shoulder, but not cleanly. Whoever had cast her out had made sure she carried the shame. He knew would. He knew when something had been struck too many times. "You hungry?" he asked. Her gaze narrowed. Suspicion flickered fast as lightning. "Why?" Rowan shrugged. "Because you look like you're losing an argument with your own bones." Silence stretched. The town street behind him stirred awake. A cart rolled by slowly. The driver looked at Rowan, then at the green shape by his wall, and looked away. "Easier not to see. Food from a human costs something," she said carefully. "Most things do. And what is the price?" Rowan thought about that longer than he expected. His workshop had been quiet for years. His wife's carved broom still leaned untouched in the corner. His house felt too large for one person. "Price as you eat," he said finally. "That's it." She stared like he'd insulted her. "That makes no sense. Most decent things don't." He unlocked the workshop door and stepped inside, leaving it open. If she wanted to follow, she would. If she didn't, she wouldn't. He filled a bowl with leftover stew from the night before, thick with potatoes and barley. Nothing special. Nothing poisoned. He set it on the small table near the doorway. He didn't look at her when she entered. He heard her. Even starving, she moved like a predator conserving energy. She stopped short of the bowl. "You'll eat first," she demanded. Rowan snorted. "Fine." He scooped a spoonful and swallowed. The stew was cold. He made a face. "See? Tragic, but safe." She waited another heartbeat, as if expecting him to collapse dramatically. When he didn't, she stepped forward and lifted the bowl. She did not devour it. She ate slowly, controlled, as if she had learned the hard way that eating too fast meant losing everything. Rowan busied himself clearing his workbench, pretending not to watch. When the bowl was empty, she set it down carefully. "You owe me nothing," he said before she could speak. Her head tilted slightly. "That is not how this works. Maybe not where you're from." Her eyes flicked around the workshop. Tools, sawdust, unfinished table legs, the broom carved with delicate wooden flowers leaning in the corner. "This is your territory," she said. "It's a workshop. You've fed an enemy. You were hungry." She studied him again. Not as prey, not as threat, as puzzle. "My name is Kayla," she said finally. Rowan wiped his hands on his apron. "Rowan." Outside, Millbridge continued pretending nothing unusual was happening. Inside the workshop, something had already shifted. A bowl of stew sat empty on the table, and the town might have called her a monster. But Rowan had just called her inside. Kayla did not leave after the bowl was empty. That surprised Rowan more than the fact that she had followed him inside at all. Most creatures driven by hunger took what they were given and vanished before kindness could sprout hooks. But Kayla stood near the doorway, watching him with that sharp, unreadable gaze, as if waiting for the second part of the trap to spring. Rowan pretended to reorganize a stack of chisels that did not need reorganizing. "Well," he said eventually, "if you're planning to haunt the threshold, at least come fully inside. Drafts are bad for the wood." She stepped forward slowly, scanning corners and exits the way soldiers did. Rowan noticed it without commenting. The workshop was a mess by most standards, tools scattered, sawdust thick along the floorboards, unfinished furniture leaning in silent accusation. 3 years of grief had turned maintenance into an afterthought. He had told himself it didn't matter, that precision and order were luxuries. Kayla ran her thumb lightly over the edge of a cluttered bench. Her brow furrowed. "You live like this?" she asked bluntly. "I work like this," Rowan corrected. "That is not the same." Rowan huffed a quiet laugh. "You volunteering to fix it?" She did not answer immediately. Her gaze moved to the broom resting in the corner, the handle carved with small wooden flowers, delicate and patient. She approached it carefully, lifting it as though it were something ceremonial rather than practical. "This was not made for sweeping alone," she said. Rowan stiffened slightly. "My wife carved it." Kayla's hands adjusted instinctively, gripped gentler now. She valued beauty in small things. She did. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was aware. Finally, Rowan cleared his throat. "Look, I'm not running a charity. If you want more than one meal, you'll need to earn it. Food for work. A roof in exchange for labor. Simple arrangement." Her eyes sharpened again at the word earn. "Work, I understand." "Good. You expect obedience?" "I expect effort." She studied him carefully. "No chains." Rowan snorted. "If I needed chains, I wouldn't have invited you inside." Something flickered behind her guarded expression. Not trust. Not yet. But confusion. "I clean," she said at last. "Good start. And I sleep. Spare room upstairs. Bed small, but it doesn't leak." Her gaze narrowed slightly. "And you do not enter without permission." Rowan blinked, then nodded once. Agreed. It wasn't hostility in her voice. It was survival. Kayla moved with quiet efficiency. She began sweeping in long, measured strokes, pushing sawdust into controlled piles rather than scattering it further. She sorted nails by size without being told, stacked planks so the warped ones separated from the straight. Rowan watched from the corner of his eye, equal parts impressed and unsettled by how quickly the space began to shift under her hands. By midday, the floor was visible again. When Ivy passed the workshop and glimpsed green skin through the open door, she stopped dead in the street. Her lips tightened. A whisper passed to a man beside her. Rowan saw it happen. He did not step outside to explain. Kayla saw it too. "They fear," she said quietly. "They're used to fearing." "And you?" Rowan wiped sweat from his brow. "I'm used to building things." She resumed sweeping. Later, as afternoon light slanted gold through the windows, Rowan placed a heel of bread and a slice of cheese on the bench. Kayla hesitated before approaching this time, not because she feared poison, but because she seemed unsure whether the second meal came with new conditions. "Eat," he said simply. She sat opposite him at the small table. For a while, only the sound of chewing filled the workshop. Finally, she spoke. "In my clan, mercy binds. I don't want binding. You gave me food. I had extra. You gave me shelter. I had space." Her eyes searched his face for the trick. "Humans do not give without taking. Maybe I'm defective." That earned the faintest huff of breath from her. Not quite laughter, but close. When evening settled, Rowan showed her the narrow staircase leading to the spare room. She stood at the doorway, inspecting it like a scout evaluating terrain. "You will not lock it?" she asked. "No." She nodded once. As Rowan turned to leave her to rest, she spoke again. "My name carries exile." He paused. "What did you do?" he asked. "I questioned killing children." The words landed heavy and flat. Rowan absorbed them without flinching. "Then exile sounds like the wrong punishment." Her amber eyes flicked toward him sharply, as if expecting sarcasm. Finding none, she looked almost unsettled. "You are strange," she said. "So I've been told." That night, Milbridge whispered. Doors closed earlier than usual. Rumors traveled faster than wind. The carpenter had brought a monster into his home. Upstairs, Kayla lay awake in a bed that did not smell of blood or stone. Downstairs, Rowan stared at the ceiling, aware that he had done something the town would not forgive easily. But the workshop was cleaner than it had been in years. And for the first time in a long while, the house did not feel entirely empty. By the third morning, the workshop no longer looked like a place grief had abandoned to dust. Kayla woke before Rowan, descending the narrow stairs with quiet, deliberate steps. She paused in the doorway to the main room, surveying the space like a commander assessing terrain. What had been clutter was now pattern. What had been neglect was now potential. She picked up the carved broom again, the one with the delicate wooden flowers winding along the handle, and resumed sweeping with patient strokes. Rowan woke to the sound, not the harsh scrape of chaos, but the steady rhythm of someone who respected the floor beneath their feet. He stood at the top of the stairs longer than he meant to, watching. Kayla moved carefully around his workbench, never bumping tools, never rushing. She had tied her dark hair back with a strip of leather, and in the morning light, her green skin carried warmth instead of the ashen gray he had first seen. "You'll wear that thing out if you keep at it," he muttered, descending. Kayla did not look up. "It deserves use." Rowan paused at that. He hadn't touched the broom in years. His wife, Alara, had carved it during a winter when snow buried the town and work had slowed. She'd laughed at him when he'd called it excessive decoration for a cleaning tool. "Even dust deserves beauty," she'd said. Kayla ran her thumb lightly along one carved petal. She carved these by hand. Yes, she was precise. She was stubborn. A small silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, but shared. Kayla leaned the broom against the wall and approached the workbench. She lifted a half-finished chair leg, examining the grain. "You stopped shaping this midway." Rowan exhaled slowly. "After she died, I stopped shaping a lot of things." Kayla did not offer sympathy. Orc culture did not drape comfort in soft words. Instead, she placed the chair leg back on the bench and reached for a sanding block. "Then shape it now," she said simply. He blinked at her. "Grief does not excuse weakness," she added, but there was no cruelty in her tone, only blunt truth. Rowan snorted. "You're bold for someone living on my second floor. You asked for effort." "Fair enough." They worked side by side that morning. Rowan guided the blade of his chisel with renewed focus. Kayla sanded with steady pressure, learning the subtle curve of furniture rather than weapons. Sawdust collected in clean lines instead of chaotic drifts. The workshop breathed again. Outside, Milbridge noticed. Crane passed the open door and slowed, peering in openly this time. His jaw tightened at the sight of Kayla standing near Rowan's bench, but he did not step inside. "Inviting trouble," he muttered loud enough to be heard. Rowan did not look up. "Morning to you too." Crane hesitated. "You don't know what you've brought into your house." Kayla paused her sanding, but did not turn. Rowan wiped his hands on his apron. "I brought in someone hungry. She's orc. She's working." Crane's gaze shifted uneasily. "They raid." She questioned one. That caught him off guard. Crane stared at Kayla again, longer this time. Not fear. Assessment. "She'll turn on you," he warned. Kayla finally turned, amber eyes steady. "If I intended harm, you would not have time to warn him." The statement was not a threat. It was fact. Crane swallowed and left without another word. Inside, Rowan chuckled quietly. "You're not subtle. Subtlety is wasted when people decide what you are before you speak." He couldn't argue with that. By midday, the chair leg had taken shape. Smooth, balanced, functional. Rowan ran his hand along the curve and nodded once. "That'll hold." Kayla leaned on the bench lightly, studying his face. "You built before me." "I did. You will build after." He met her gaze, surprised by the certainty in her tone. "I don't plan on dying this week," he replied dryly. "That is wise." He picked up the carved broom again and held it out to her. "You're careful with this." "It carries memory," she said. "So do you." A flicker passed through her eyes, pain, quickly buried. "You do not ask about my exile," she noted. "You'll tell me when you want." Another small silence. "Strength is not always in arms," she said slowly. "Sometimes it is in restraint." Rowan rested the broom back in the corner. The workshop was different now. Cleaner, yes. But more than that, alive. Tools returned to their hooks. Wood stacked in order. The chair leg ready for assembly. As evening approached, Kayla stepped outside briefly, watching children dart past in the street. They stared openly at her tusks. One small boy tripped, fell hard, and scraped his knee. His mother hesitated, torn between rushing forward and avoiding the orc in her sight line. Kayla crouched first. Her movements were slow, deliberate, hands open. "You are bleeding," she observed calmly. The boy sniffled. She tore a strip from her own worn sleeve and tied it neatly around his knee. When she stood, the mother stared at her as though she'd witnessed something impossible. Kayla did not wait for thanks. She returned to the workshop without comment. Rowan had watched from the doorway. "They'll remember that," he said quietly. Kayla picked up the broom again, sweeping stray dust toward the threshold. "They may," she replied. "Or they may not. Either way," she swept. And Rowan understood something new that evening. The town called her a monster. But monsters did not carry brooms carved with flowers as if they were sacred. Monsters did not bind wounds. Monsters did not rebuild rooms they had no obligation to care about. As the sun dipped behind Millbridge's rooftops, the workshop stood orderly and steady. And somewhere between sawdust and silence, something stronger than fear had begun to take root. By the end of the week, Kayla could no longer remain invisible. It was not possible for a 7-foot orc woman to fade quietly into a town like Millbridge. Even inside Rowan's workshop, her presence carried weight, not threatening, but undeniable. Outside, in the open lanes between stalls and stone houses, that weight became spectacle. Rowan insisted she walk with him to market. "You need boots that fit," he said, eyeing the worn leather at her feet. "And I need nails that aren't bent." Kayla understood the unspoken part. If she was to stay, she had to exist in daylight. They walked side by side down Baker Street. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The butcher's cleaver paused mid-swing. A woman gathering laundry hurried her children inside. Kayla did not lower her gaze. She walked as she had in battle, measured, aware of every shift in the air, every tightening jaw, every hand hovering too close to a hidden blade. Rowan felt it too. The tension, the way space opened in front of them like a ripple in still water. "Keep your shoulders loose," he murmured quietly. "They are," she replied. He glanced sideways. "I meant for them." Her mouth twitched faintly. They reached Ivy's vegetable stall first. Ivy's hands stilled on a basket of carrots. Her eyes flicked from Rowan to Kayla and back again. "You're bold," Ivy muttered. "So I've been told," Rowan answered. "You bring her here like this?" "She needs boots." Ivy studied Kayla longer this time. "Not as a rumor, as a presence." "You planning to raid my stall?" Ivy asked bluntly. Kayla met her gaze evenly. "Your carrots do not interest me." A small boy nearby snorted at that. Ivy's lips tightened, but not in anger, in thought. "You hurt anyone yet?" she asked. "No," Rowan answered. "Good." Ivy resumed, sorting vegetables. "Don't." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. They moved on. At the cobbler's stall, the reaction was sharper. The cobbler stepped back immediately, shaking his head. "No." Rowan frowned. "You haven't even heard the request." "I don't make boots for," he caught himself before saying it aloud. "For what?" Rowan pressed. The man swallowed. "For trouble." Kayla stepped forward slightly, her shadow stretching across the cobbler's wares. "I pay." The cobbler hesitated. "Double," Rowan added flatly. Coins changed minds faster than sermons. By the time measurements were taken, the crowd had grown. Whispers slid through the market like wind through dry grass. "She'll turn on him. It's unnatural. He's gone soft." Crane appeared at the edge of the gathering, arms folded, expression hard. "This won't end well," he said loudly. Kayla turned toward him, not aggressive, not defensive. "You predict the future?" she asked calmly. "I predict patterns," Crane shot back. Rowan stepped between them slightly. "What pattern are you seeing?" "Every time humans trust orcs, it ends in blood." Kayla's jaw tightened. "I trusted humans once," she said quietly. "It ended in blood." The market fell still. Crane blinked. Rowan did not look surprised. "What happened?" Ivy asked from behind her stall before she could stop herself. Kayla's gaze drifted over the gathered faces, suspicion, fear, curiosity. "My clan raided a village," she said evenly. "I questioned it. They called me weak. They exiled me." The words landed heavy. "You sided with humans?" someone whispered. "I sided with children," she corrected. Silence deepened. Crane's expression faltered for the first time. Rowan didn't speak. He didn't need to. Kayla stood alone in the center of the square, not pleading, not defending herself with flourish, just stating truth. Finally, Ivy cleared her throat. "Carrots are 2 copper," she muttered, as though returning the world to its axis. The tension eased slightly. Not gone, but shifted. A little girl, no more than 6, tugged at her mother's skirt and pointed at Kayla's tusks. Do they hurt? She asked openly. The mother tried to hush her, mortified. Kayla crouched slowly, lowering herself to the child's height. They are part of me, she said gently. Like your teeth. The girl leaned closer. Can you bite apples? Yes. The girl grinned. Cool. A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. When Kayla stood again, the air felt different. Still wary, but cracked. Crane watched closely, conflict visible on his face. You think one speech changes anything? He asked Rowan quietly. No, Rowan replied. But one conversation might. They finished their errands. Boots ordered. Nails purchased. Carrots tucked into a sack. As they walked back toward the workshop, Kayla's shoulders remained steady. But once inside, once the door closed, she exhaled deeply, the first true sign of strain. They hate, she said. Some do. And you? Rowan set the sack down and leaned against the workbench. I see someone who fixed my floor, shaped my chair leg, and tied a child's bandage without being asked. She looked at him carefully. That is not what they see. They'll learn. And if they do not? Rowan shrugged lightly. Then they're missing out. Kayla stared at him, puzzled, almost frustrated. You risk reputation, she said. I've lived long enough to know reputation doesn't keep you warm at night. A faint, reluctant smile touched her mouth. You are stubborn, she said. Apparently. Outside, Millbridge returned to its rhythms. Inside the workshop, Kayla removed her worn boots and flexed her toes, already imagining sturdier ones. The town had stared. The town had judged. But it had also listened. And listening, even begrudging, was the first crack in fear. Rowan picked up his tools again. Kayla lifted the carved broom. And though the market still whispered monster, the workshop felt less like exile and more like something steadily, dangerously close to belonging. The knock came just before dusk. It was not polite. It was not hesitant. It was the sound of knuckles striking wood with the confidence of someone who did not expect refusal. Rowan looked up from the half-assembled table he and Kayla had been working on. Kayla had already stilled. The change in her posture was immediate, not fear, but readiness. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted slightly. Her hand drifted instinctively toward the knife she kept sheathed at her lower back. Rowan wiped his hands slowly and crossed the workshop floor. When he opened the door, he had to tilt his head back. The orc standing outside was massive, broader than Kayla by half again, scarred from brow to jaw, one tusk chipped at the tip. His armor was not mismatched exile leather. It was clan-forged, dark steel plates etched with angular markings. Authority hung on him like a second skin. His amber eyes slid past Rowan immediately and locked onto Kayla. Zorith clan, he said in a voice like stone grinding. I have found you. Kayla did not step backward. You were not searching for me, she replied evenly. You were sent. A flicker of approval passed across the warrior's face. Correct. Rowan felt the weight of the air shift. The street behind him had already begun to quiet. Neighbors sensed it, the tension coiling outward like smoke. You've said your piece, Rowan said calmly. State your business. The orc finally looked down at him. And you are owner of this workshop. The warrior's gaze sharpened. You shelter her. I do. You understand what she is? Rowan did not blink. Hungry, last I checked. Kayla's jaw tightened faintly. The warrior's lip curled slightly, exposing the chipped tusk. She is Oathbreaker. Clan Defier. She questioned Blood Command. I questioned Slaughter, Kayla corrected. The warrior's voice dropped lower. You questioned Strength. I questioned killing children, she replied again, louder this time. The street had fallen completely silent now. Doors cracked open. Eyes peered from shadows. The warrior stepped closer to the threshold. She belongs to us, he said. Kayla took one step forward, placing herself fully visible in the doorway beside Rowan. I was exiled, she said clearly. You stripped my marks. You left me to die. And you survived, the warrior replied. That does not erase your debt. Rowan's jaw tightened. She doesn't owe you anything, he said. The warrior's gaze snapped to him again. This is not human law. Good thing we're in a human town. The tension spiked. The warrior's hand drifted toward the axe at his side. Kayla moved faster, not attacking, but shifting her stance slightly, so she stood between Rowan and the blade's natural arc. You will not threaten him, she said quietly. The warrior studied her carefully now. You protect him, he observed. He fed me. A pause. That binds you, the warrior said. It does not. In our clan, life given demands life returned. Kayla's voice did not waver. He did not demand it. The warrior's expression hardened. Then he is foolish. Rowan shrugged slightly. Been called worse. The warrior exhaled sharply through his nose, not quite a laugh. Clan law does not bend for human sentiment, he said. You will return. Face counsel. Accept judgment. I already faced judgment, Kayla replied. I was exiled. Exile can be revoked. And death imposed, she countered. Silence thickened. Rowan felt it then, the true weight of the visit. This was not a casual retrieval. It was a warning. If you refuse, the warrior said slowly, the clan will not ignore it. I am not clan, Kayla replied. You are blood. I am choice. That landed. The warrior's eyes narrowed. You grow soft. Kayla's chin lifted higher. No, I grow certain. Rowan felt a strange surge of pride he hadn't expected. You want her, he said calmly to the warrior. You'll have to convince her. The warrior's gaze shifted between them, measuring, calculating. You stand in front of her, he said to Rowan. Yes. You understand that makes you enemy? Rowan met his stare evenly. Then I suppose I'm enemy. A long, dangerous moment passed. Then the warrior stepped back from the threshold. This is not finished, he said. The clan does not abandon blood lightly. He turned without another word and strode down the street, villagers parting instinctively in his wake. Only when he vanished beyond the bend did sound return to Millbridge. Doors closed. Whispers resumed. Rowan shut the workshop door slowly. Inside, the quiet felt heavier than before. Kayla stood rigid, breathing controlled but shallow. They will come again, she said. Probably, Rowan agreed. You could send me away. Not happening. You would risk your town. I risk it every time I build something that might collapse, he replied. Doesn't mean I stop building. She stared at him. In my clan, she said slowly, there is a word. Voradh. Life bound to life. When someone saves you from death, your breath belongs to them. Rowan shook his head immediately. I don't want that. It is not something you want, she replied. It simply is. No, he said firmly. You don't belong to me. Not by Stu. Not by shelter. Not by anything. Her expression shifted, confusion, then something quieter. You reject strength? She asked. I reject ownership. The workshop felt smaller in that moment, not claustrophobic, but intense. If the clan returns with more than one warrior, she said carefully, this will not be words at the door. Rowan crossed back to the workbench and picked up his hammer. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Kayla stepped closer. You are not warrior. No, he agreed. I'm carpenter. That will not stop axes. Maybe not, he said lightly. But I've spent 30 years learning how to brace beams against pressure. She studied him for a long moment. You are stubborn beyond reason. Apparently. A faint breath escaped her. Not laughter, not quite. Outside, the town still whispered. Inside, the workshop remained steady. The clan had cast its shadow. But Rowan had not stepped aside. And for the first time since exile, Kayla did not feel hunted. She felt defended. Not as property, not as debt, but as someone worth standing in front of. And that changed everything. The morning after the warrior's visit, Millbridge did not pretend. It judged. Whispers moved faster than carts. Faces that had softened over the past weeks hardened again. The shared glances were no longer curious. They were calculating. People weren't just looking at Kayla now. They were looking at Rowan. He felt it in the way conversations stopped when he entered the square. In the way Crane did not nod when their eyes met. In the way Ivy's usual sharp commentary was replaced with tight silence. The threat had shape now, and shape made fear louder. By midday, Crane arrived at the workshop uninvited. He did not knock. He pushed the door open with more force than necessary. You need to send her away, he said immediately. Kayla, who had been sanding the tabletop they'd nearly finished, stilled but did not turn. Rowan continued fitting a joint, forcing Crane to speak again. You heard me. I did. Crane stepped further inside. You saw that warrior. You heard what he said. They won't stop with one visit. Probably not. So you're just going to sit here and wait? Rowan finally looked up. I'm working. Crane's jaw tightened. You're putting all of us at risk. Kayla set down the sanding block slowly and turned. I did not ask for your protection, she said evenly. That's not the point, Crane snapped. This town has survived because we don't invite wars to our doorstep. I did not invite war, Kayla replied. I refused it. Crane scoffed. That doesn't matter to them. It matters to me, she said. Silence sharpened. Rowan wiped his hands clean. What do you want, Crane? I want you to think beyond your own stubborn pride. If her clan comes with 10 warriors instead of 1, what then? You going to stand in the doorway again? Yes. The answer was immediate. Crane stared at him like he'd lost sense entirely. You can't fight a clan. I don't need to fight a clan, Rowan said quietly. I need to decide what kind of man I am. Crane faltered slightly at that. Kayla's gaze flicked between them, something conflicted moving beneath her calm exterior. When Crane left, muttering about fools and funerals, the workshop felt heavier than it had the night before. Kayla stood very still for a long moment. Then she spoke. I will leave. Rowan didn't look up. No. You heard him. I did. They are not wrong. He set the chisel down carefully. They are afraid. Yes. And fear makes people small. She stepped closer, voice low but steady. You could be safe if I go. Safe is overrated. You are willing to lose your standing. I lost my wife 3 years ago, Rowan replied quietly. Standing doesn't scare me. The words hit harder than either of them expected. Kayla's breath caught almost imperceptibly. You would face my clan, she said slowly. For someone who is not blood. Rowan met her gaze directly. Family isn't blood. Her amber eyes searched his face. In my clan, she said, family is survival. Here too. She hesitated. Then why does your town not see me as such? Because change is slow, he answered. And slow things look weak until they hold. She absorbed that. Outside, a small crowd had begun to gather near the workshop door. Not hostile, not supportive. Watching. Word had spread that Crane confronted the carpenter. Millbridge was waiting to see what Rowan would choose. Kayla walked toward the door and stepped outside. The crowd stiffened. She stood in full view, sunlight glinting along the edge of her tusks. I will not bring war to your homes, she said clearly. A murmur rippled. If my clan comes, they come for me. Not you. That's not how raids work, someone called back. No, she agreed. But it is how honor works. Rowan stepped out beside her. She's not leaving, he said plainly. The murmurs sharpened. You'd risk us. I'd risk myself, he corrected. You don't get to decide for the rest of us. No, Rowan agreed calmly. You get to decide what kind of town you are. That quieted them more than shouting would have. You can send her out and hope they respect that, Rowan continued. Or you can show them we don't trade people for safety. The weight of that settled heavily. Ivy stepped forward first. She hasn't harmed anyone, she said stiffly. And she tied my nephew's bandage better than his own mother. A few reluctant nods followed. Crane stood at the back, arms folded tight. You're gambling with lives, he said. Rowan met his gaze. So are they. Silence deepened. No vote was taken. No proclamation declared. But no one stepped forward to force Kayla out. It was not unity. It was not courage. It was something smaller, but real. The crowd dispersed slowly. Back inside the workshop, Kayla exhaled for the first time in several minutes. You could have let me go, she said. I could have. Why didn't you? Rowan picked up the half-built table leg and adjusted its angle. Because you're not a problem to remove. She watched him carefully. What am I? He didn't hesitate. Family. The words settled in the room like a foundation stone. Kayla did not smile, or weep, or speak immediately, but her posture shifted. Subtly, less guarded, less ready to leave. Outside, Millbridge continued in uneasy motion. Inside, something steadier had been chosen. The town had not fully accepted her, but it had not cast her out. And sometimes, not stepping away is the first act of standing together. They came at dawn. Not one warrior this time. 8. Rowan saw them first as dark shapes cresting the eastern hill, silhouettes cut against the pale wash of morning light. They did not hide their approach. They did not skulk or scout. They walked openly, armor glinting in sharp angles, axes resting across broad shoulders like extensions of bone. Millbridge saw them too. Doors shut, shutters latched. The shared table in the square stood abandoned, yesterday's dust still clinging to its surface. Inside the workshop, Kayla had already strapped on the bracers she kept wrapped in cloth upstairs. Not ceremonial armor, not full battle gear, just enough to move without hesitation. Rowan stood at the doorway, hammer resting loose in his hand. He knew how ridiculous it looked, a carpenter with a tool against trained warriors. But ridiculous and resolved were not the same thing. They will not speak long. Kayla said quietly behind him. Then we won't either, Rowan replied. The warriors reached the edge of the square and fanned out instinctively, forming a half-circle around the workshop entrance. The scarred warrior from before stood at the center. His gaze locked onto Kayla immediately. You were warned, he said. I remember, she answered. The air felt tight, stretched thin enough to tear. Villagers gathered at a distance, not brave enough to stand beside the doorway, but not willing to hide entirely either. Fear had roots here, but so did stubbornness. You will return, the warriors said. Clan council has spoken. I have no mark, Kayla replied evenly. You stripped it. Exile is reversible. So is allegiance. A ripple passed through the gathered orcs. The scarred warrior's jaw flexed. You stand in a human doorway like a pet, he said. You shame blood. Kayla did not flinch. I stand where I choose. Rowan felt the words land in his spine. The warrior's gaze shifted to him. You will move. No. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. Just simple refusal. You understand what defiance costs? The warrior asked. Yes. The orc's lip curled slightly. You think wood and tools will stop steel? No, Rowan said calmly. But witnesses might. The warrior's eyes flicked toward the edges of the square. More villagers had gathered now. Crane stood there, crossbow in hand. Ivy beside him. The miller. Even the cobbler who had refused boots. They were afraid. That much was obvious. But they had not run. Kayla saw it too. Something softened in her gaze. You bring your clan's quarrel into our streets, Rowan continued. If blood spills here, it's on you. The scarred warrior stepped forward, boots grinding against stone. We do not answer to humans. You answer to consequence, Rowan replied. A tense breath passed. Then a new voice cut through the square. Enough. It carried weight without volume. The warriors parted slightly as an older orc stepped through the line. Her hair was braided with silver threads, armor simpler, but marked with symbols deeper and older than the rest. Her posture was not loud. It was inevitable. Kayla's eyes widened a fraction. Elder Varesh, she said. The elder's gaze rested on her calmly. You have caused disturbance. I questioned slaughter. You defied command. I did. The elder studied her long and carefully. Not as enemy. Not as subordinate. As blood. Then she turned her gaze to Rowan. You are the carpenter. I am. You fed her. Yes. You sheltered her. Yes. Why? Rowan exhaled slowly. Because she was hungry. A flicker of something unreadable passed across the elder's expression. You risk war for that. I risked stew, Rowan corrected. A faint sound, almost like restrained amusement, moved through the elder's throat. She turned back to Kayla. You claim choice over blood. I do. You would not return? I would not. The elder's gaze sharpened. And if the clan names you traitor? I will live with it. The square held its breath. The elder looked toward the scarred warrior, who stood rigid, expecting an order. Instead, she spoke clearly enough for all to hear. Exile stands. The scarred warrior stiffened. Elder. Exile stands, she repeated. She chose defiance once. She chooses again now. The clan will not hunt what it cast away. A ripple of shock passed through both sides. Kayla did not move. The elder stepped closer to her. You have not returned for forgiveness. No. You have not begged. No. You stand in human shadow, yet do not kneel. Kayla lifted her chin. I kneel to no shadow. A slow nod. Then you are no longer bloodbound. The words were quiet, but final. The elder turned away from the workshop door. We leave. The warriors hesitated only a second before obeying. Steel shifted. Boots turned. Within moments, the square was filled only with villagers and silence. Rowan realized he had not breathed properly in several minutes. He lowered the hammer slowly. Kayla remained still, staring at the retreating figures until they vanished beyond the hill. They will not return, she said softly. Are you sure? The elder does not speak twice. The villagers began to murmur. Confusion, relief, disbelief. Crane lowered his crossbow. Ivy wiped her hands on her apron. No one cheered, but no one accused. Rowan turned slightly toward Kayla. You all right? She looked at him then, not guarded, not defensive, just present. I am free, she said. He nodded once. Good. The sun rose higher over Millbridge, warming the cobblestones, catching on the edge of the shared table. Kayla stepped back inside the workshop. Rowan followed. The doorway remained open, not as barrier, as threshold. And this time, they were both standing on the same side of it. Not because of blood, not because of debt. Because they chose to. The town did not celebrate. Millbridge was not the sort of place that threw parades for conflicts avoided. It absorbed things quietly, like wood swelling after rain, slow, internal, irreversible. The morning after the clan left, the square looked exactly the same. Same cobblestones, same stalls, same shared table standing at the center like an unanswered question. But the air was different. Kayla stepped into the square without glancing toward the hills. For the first time since exile, she did not feel hunted. Freedom, she discovered, was quieter than she expected. Rowan noticed it in small things. The way her shoulders no longer angled toward escape routes. The way she no longer paused at the sound of distant footsteps. The way she set her tools down instead of keeping them within immediate reach. "You're lighter," he observed one afternoon as they adjusted the final joint of a long bench. "I am unbound," she replied. He leaned back slightly. "You said that before." "Yes. And now?" She ran her hand over the smooth grain of the bench, testing for imperfections. "Now I understand it." He waited. "4ADH would have tied me to you," she said carefully. "Life for life. Breath for breath. I never wanted that." "I know." She met his gaze steadily. "That is why it matters." The workshop door creaked open then, not with tension but hesitation. Crane stepped inside. Not storming. Not demanding. Just entering. He removed his cap, scratching at the back of his neck awkwardly. "Heard the elders speak," he muttered. Rowan nodded. "You did." Crane's eyes flicked briefly to Kayla, less flinched now, more thought. "They won't come back." "No," Kayla said calmly. Crane exhaled slowly. "Good." Silence stretched. Then he stepped forward and placed a small bundle of iron nails on the bench. "For the table," he said gruffly. "Figured it ought to be reinforced." Rowan blinked. Crane shifted uncomfortably. "Don't look at me like that. I'm not apologizing." Kayla inclined her head slightly. "You are reinforcing structure." Something like that. When he left, the workshop felt fuller than before. Rowan stared at the nails in his palm. "That," he said quietly, "is progress." Kayla considered it. "In my clan, respect is shown through strength. And here," she gestured toward the nails, "through contribution." The bench was finished by dusk. They carried it together to the square and placed it beside the shared table. It fit cleanly, balanced, stable. Ivy arrived shortly after, carrying a pot without announcement. She set it on the table and looked directly at Kayla this time. "Stew," she said simply. Kayla nodded once. "Thank you." Ivy hesitated. "You stood your ground," she added, quieter. "That counts for something." The miller joined. Then the cobbler. No grand speech. No ceremony. Just presence. Kayla sat beside Rowan. Not behind him, not guarded by him. Beside. Food passed slowly at first. Hands brushed accidentally over wood shaped by both oak and iron bark. Children climbed onto benches without asking permission. The world did not shift all at once. But it shifted. Later, when lantern lights softened the square, Rowan leaned back slightly and watched Kayla speaking with Ivy in low tones. No tension in her jaw. No readiness to spring. He stepped closer. "You could leave," he said quietly. She looked at him. "There is no clan holding you now," he continued. "No debt. No exile." She studied him carefully. "Do you wish me to?" "No." "Then I remain. Because of what I gave you." She shook her head once. "Because of what you did not demand." He absorbed that. "In my clan," she continued, "loyalty is commanded. And here," she looked around the square, at villagers who once feared her, now arguing lightly over bread portions. "Here, loyalty is chosen." Rowan smiled faintly. "That's better." "Yes." A child ran past, nearly colliding with her knee. She steadied him instinctively. He grinned up at her without fear. "Can you lift the big bench again?" he asked. She glanced at Rowan. He shrugged. "It's good practice." She lifted the end of the bench easily, the child's eyes widening in delight. Laughter followed. Not forced. Not careful. Just natural. When the square slowly emptied and lanterns burned low, Rowan and Kayla remained seated. "You're not staying because you owe me," he said quietly. "No. You're staying because you want to." "Yes." He nodded once. "Good." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You call me family." "I did. In my clan, family is blood. And here." She considered that. "Family," she said slowly, is who stands when standing costs something. Rowan looked at the doorway of the workshop, still open, still unbarred. The clan had cast her out. The town had nearly done the same. But here she sat, not because of obligation, not because of exile, because she chose. And that choice, Rowan understood, was stronger than any oath forged in steel. The town had once called her a monster. The carpenter had called her family. Now, as night settled gently over Millbridge, those two truths no longer fought each other. They simply existed, and one of them was finally winning. Winter crept toward Millbridge without ceremony, bringing longer nights and the kind of cold that settled into bone. The shared table in the square had become part of the town's rhythm now. Not always full, not always harmonious, but present. Orc traders passed through more frequently. Conversations that once would have sparked blades now sparked debate instead. It was imperfect, uneven, but it held. Until the fire. It began just after sunset, when the wind shifted hard from the north. A lantern overturned in the cloth stall at the edge of the square, whether by accident or carelessness, no one later agreed. Fabric caught quickly. Flame licked upward in hungry spirals. Within seconds, the fire leapt from stall to stall, chasing canvas and dry wood like prey. Someone screamed. Rowan was already moving before he registered the sound fully. He burst from the workshop with a bucket in hand, shouting for water. Smoke clawed into the sky. Sparks snapped and scattered across rooftops. Kayla did not hesitate. She ran straight into the thickest smoke. "Kayla!" Rowan shouted. But she was already there, ripping down burning canvas with bare hands, stamping embers under heavy boots. The heat did not slow her. Her exile scars gleamed in the firelight like old maps. Panic spread faster than flame. People scattered in all directions. Some tried to form bucket lines. Others froze. A beam cracked loudly overhead as part of the cloth stall's frame gave way. A child's cry cut through the chaos. Rowan turned sharply. Near the far end of the square, a small boy stood trapped between a fallen cart and the spreading edge of the fire. Smoke rolled thick around him. Kayla saw it too. Without breaking stride, she barreled toward the collapsing structure. A burning support beam dropped directly in her path. She caught it mid-fall with a grunt, muscles straining as sparks exploded around her. Rowan felt his heart slam against his ribs. She threw the beam aside and reached the boy in 3 strides, lifting him easily and shielding him against her chest as embers rained down. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The monster ran into fire, not away from it. Rowan rushed forward to meet her halfway, taking the boy from her arms and carrying him to safety. The child clung to his neck, sobbing but alive. Kayla did not stop. She turned back toward the blaze. By now, Crane had organized a bucket line properly. Ivy was shouting directions with surprising authority. The miller hauled water barrels from storage. Kayla positioned herself at the edge of the most dangerous section, bracing a sagging support post long enough for 2 men to drag a water-soaked tarp beneath it. Her skin blistered where sparks caught. She did not release her hold until the structure collapsed safely inward instead of outward. The fire raged for nearly an hour before it finally began to retreat under coordinated effort. When the last flames sputtered into smoke, the square stood scarred but not destroyed. Several stalls were charred. The shared table bore blackened marks along one edge. But the homes behind it remained standing. Silence settled heavily over the square. Smoke curled upward into the cold night air. Kayla stood near the center, breathing hard, soot streaking across her green skin. One forearm was blistered raw. Her leather bracers had burned away at the edges. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the child she had carried broke free from his mother's grip and ran toward her. "You saved me," he shouted, wrapping small arms around her leg. The square inhaled collectively. Kayla froze for a fraction of a second, then carefully placed a soot-blackened hand on his head. "You were in the wrong place," she said gently. "You came anyway," the boy insisted. His mother approached slowly, eyes wet, expression shaken in ways deeper than fear. "Thank you," she whispered. It was not grand. It was not loud, but it was real. Crane stepped forward next, crossbow slung uselessly at his back. "You could have left him," he said. "Yes," Kayla answered. "But you didn't." "No." He studied her long and carefully. Then, in front of everyone, he nodded once. "Then you're one of us," he said. The words fell heavy. Rowan felt something tighten in his throat. The miller clapped a large hand on her shoulder. Ivy pressed a cloth into her burned arm without being asked. No one stepped back from her. No one avoided her shadow. The town did not see tusks. They saw hands blackened by fire. Rowan approached last. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "I have had worse," she replied. He took her arm gently anyway, guiding her toward the workshop. Behind them, villagers began cleaning debris without prompting. Orc traders who had remained in town worked alongside human neighbors, hauling charred timber into piles. The shared table stood between them, scarred but intact. Inside the workshop, Rowan cleaned her burns carefully, jaw tight with restrained emotion. "You don't have to prove yourself every time," he muttered. "I was not proving," she said. "Then what?" She met his gaze steadily. "I was protecting family." He paused. Outside, the town continued working together under starlight. The fire had taken wood. It had taken cloth. But it had burned something else away too. The last thin thread of doubt. The town had once called her a monster. Tonight, they had watched her run into flame for them. And in the glow of smoke and embers, the truth stood clear. Monsters do not carry children out of burning squares. Family does. Snow fell the night the first frost settled fully over Millbridge. Not heavy, not dramatic, just a quiet layering of white that softened the charm marks still visible in the square. The burned stalls had been rebuilt in the weeks since the fire, stronger frames, tighter joints, fewer careless lantern hooks. The shared table had been sanded smooth again, though a faint dark seam remained where flame had kissed oak and iron bark alike. Rowan had left it there on purpose. Scars, he'd learned, did not weaken wood. They told the truth of pressure survived. Inside the workshop, the air was warm with the scent of pine shavings. Kayla stood at the bench opposite him, carving careful lines into the back of a new chair, her movements slower now, more deliberate than when she had first arrived months ago. Not because she was uncertain, because she was patient. "You're improving," Rowan muttered without looking up. "You say that every week." "Because it's true every week." She tilted her head slightly, examining the curve she'd just shaped. "In my clan, praise is rare." "Well, get used to it." A small huff of breath escaped her, almost laughter. The workshop door opened without tension. Not cautiously, not defiantly, just opened. Ivy stepped inside, carrying a small basket wrapped in cloth. "Winter bread," she announced, setting it on the table. "And before you refuse, it's not charity." Rowan raised a brow. "Wouldn't dream of it." She glanced at Kayla briefly, then held out a smaller wrapped bundle. "For the burns," she said. "Herbal salve." Kayla accepted it carefully. "Thank you." Ivy nodded once, brisk, but not uncomfortable, and left without further ceremony. Kayla turned the small jar in her hands thoughtfully. "They no longer whisper when I pass," she said. "Some still do." "Yes," she agreed, "but not with fear." Rowan set his chisel down and leaned back slightly. "You know," he said, "they'll tell this story wrong someday." Kayla glanced at him. "How?" "They'll say you fought off a clan alone, or that you carried 5 children from the fire instead of 1. She considered that. "Exaggeration is common in oral histories," she said seriously. He chuckled. "That it is." Silence settled again, comfortable now. Not heavy, not uncertain, just shared. After a moment, Kayla set the carving tool down. "When you first fed me," she said slowly, "I believed it was weakness. Most people did. In my clan, mercy is costly. It is here too." She stepped around the bench, coming to stand beside him rather than across. "You called me family before I believed it," she said. "You didn't argue very hard. I did not understand." He studied her expression. "And now?" She looked toward the square visible through the workshop window. Children tossing snow at one another. Crane arguing with the miller over something unimportant. The shared table dusted white, but occupied nonetheless. "Now I know family is not blood," she said quietly. "It is who stands in the doorway when the world says move." Rowan felt the words settle deep. Outside, a group of children ran past the workshop and paused. "Kayla," one shouted. "We're building a snow wall. You promised to help." She glanced at Rowan. He waved her off with mock irritation. "Go reinforce structural integrity." She stepped outside into the falling snow. The children swarmed her immediately, tugging at her sleeves, laughing as she lifted a packed block of snow larger than any of them could manage. She stacked it carefully, adjusting angles instinctively. "Angles redirect," she muttered. The smallest boy grinned. What? Nothing, she replied. Rowan stood in the doorway watching. Not guarding, not shielding, just watching. The town no longer shifted nervously at the sight of green skin in the square. They waved. They called her name. They argued with her about snow wall strategy. When Crane passed, he stopped and handed her a thicker pair of gloves without comment. She took them. No one called her monster anymore. If they did it quietly enough not to matter. As evening fell, lanterns flickered to life around the square. The shared table filled gradually, bread passed hand to hand, stew ladled generously. Kayla returned to the workshop briefly, brushing snow from her shoulders. You are needed, she told Rowan. I'm always needed, he replied lightly. She studied him with that steady amber gaze. You built more than wood. He shrugged. Didn't mean to. That does not lessen it. He stepped into the square beside her. The town made space without thinking. Not because they feared her size, because they were accustomed to her presence. Someone handed Rowan a mug. Someone else pressed a bowl into Kayla's hands. They sat at the shared table. Oak and ironbark joined without hiding the seam. Rowan glanced down at the faint dark mark left from the fire. It held, he murmured. Yes, Kayla said. Snow continued falling gently. Children laughed. Neighbors argued about trivialities. The world did not transform into perfection. There were still differences, still scars, still stories told in quiet corners. But the town no longer saw a monster when they looked at her. They saw the one who ran into fire, the one who stood in the doorway, the one who chose to stay. And Rowan, the aging carpenter who had once only meant to offer a bowl of stew, leaned back in his chair and understood something simple and permanent. You cannot force belonging. You can only build it. And sometimes, the strongest things in the world are not forged in steel or blood, but in the quiet, stubborn decision to call someone family.